Hello. Okay, today I was just going through my Canva docs of past units that I've done. So what I generally do is if I'm at a point creating a new product where I just feel kind of stuck and I'm like, oh, I just need to get my ideas flowing, then I will go look back through my other products. I also keep a list of ideas that sometimes it just helps me to see it visually. And I was going over, I wanted to create a new vocabulary style product and some pages to put into a guided research project that I'm making. And I opened up my Wild Words by Gary Paulsen writer's project and I was like, oh, I love this resource. I know I'm super biased, but I love it. And I often go through phases where I just am in kind of a flurry of creating. And that's the part I love. I love the creating the products. I hate the marketing of the products. I hate marketing. I don't like it. And I will pretty much do anything but. And so here's my attempt to give people a better look at this resource because I'm like, oh, I really love it. I think other people would like it too and find it helpful. First of all, Gary Paulsen. I mean, I read a lot as a child and I had a very lengthy survival era where I was reading anything Gary Paulsen wrote, anything Jean Craighead George wrote. It was just about going off into the wilderness and surviving on my own. I think there's just so many relatable themes in those stories. So Hatchet, I love it. I love that book so much. I read it multiple times as a kid. I have read it to my kids. They both loved it. My husband experienced it for the first time as a 40-year-old and he loved it. We listened to it frequently as a family. My Side of the Mountain, same thing. Loved that book as a kid. I also have a resource pack on that I'm going to show you here in this video. Again, read it multiple times as a kid, read it with my kids, read it with my husband. We just love it. And here's another interesting little tidbit about me. I don't know if you experience just the sleepless nights at times, especially maybe during this season of life. But definitely there's just nights where my mind just races and I have trouble sleeping. And so sometimes I would try to listen to, certain things, meditations or something like that. But then I was just maybe if I just listen to a book. And so then I would listen to the book I was currently reading. And I was like, well, that doesn't work because now I'm just invested in the story and I need to see where it goes. So I started putting on My Side of the Mountain and immediately my nervous system just goes whoosh. And I just feel so calm. So I set a timer for 15 minutes. I put my headphones in so I don't disrupt my husband. And I put on My Side of the Mountain. And I just immediately start feeling calm and I drift off to sleep within those 15 minutes. So there's a sleep hack for you. Maybe you'll be the same. Anyways, back to the actual education portion of this. So I thought, what would it look like if Gary Paulsen wrote a writer's workshop for kids? So I kind of thought, I'm just going to explore that aspect a little bit. And we're going to pretend that Gary maybe wrote parts of this unit. So it says if Gary were to introduce this unit, he might say something like this. All right, listen up, writers. You think you want to write like me, Gary Paulsen? Scraping the grit of survival onto the page, huh? Well, this isn't summer camp story time. This is about getting down to the bone, bare-knuckled truth of words. We'll be talking wilderness, sure, the bite of the wind and the gnaw of hunger, but mostly we'll be wrestling with words, learning how to make them fight for you. No flowery stuff here. We'll be using echoes to hammer home a point, shrapnel sentences to show not tell, and gritty descriptions that pack a punch. You'll learn to throw rocks at your characters.
Don't tell means using descriptive language and actions to convey the story.
Oh, echo stop. Echo stop. Sorry, that is my Amazon Alexa device, and because I said echoes, she started telling me about this. I was so confused. You'll learn to throw rocks at your characters and get wild with your words. Over 9 lessons, we'll sweat and struggle, learn how to build a story that immerses your reader like a blizzard in the Arctic, and maybe just Maisie squeeze a decent story out of you. This isn't for the faint of heart. You ready? Let's get started. So you just imagine that's maybe what Paulsen would say. So we're going to start this off with a pivotal moment, which I think I have this in order. This is like the pack I use to do product photography. But we could talk about some stories from Gary Paulsen's personal narrative, his Gone to the Woods, Surviving a Lost Childhood. It's a brilliant like autobiography. It is very sad in parts for sure. So just FYI. The kids are going to go through some, and I don't have all the pages printed out, so I'm going to be skipping ahead here, just FYI. If you want a full list of everything in the unit, it's always on the product description. But pivotal people in your life, kind of identifying those, because a librarian was extremely pivotal in Gary Paulsen's writing. We're going to talk about descriptive writing, and we also have examples. I think that's something that's not done enough when teaching writing to kids, is to give them, if you're going to teach a new concept, give them a solid example. That's why you'll see even in my guided research projects that if I'm going to ask them to write an opinion essay or a persuasive essay or an expository essay, I'm going to give them an example of that academic format for them. So same thing here with the descriptive writing. And so we talk through some of the how-tos, basically as if Gary were writing this to you. Again, he didn't. But some things. Sweat the details, not the thesaurus. Nature is a character, not just a backdrop, or not a backdrop. Action speaks louder. Show, don't tell. So don't just, a hungry man isn't ravenously devouring food. He's gnawing on it like a wolverine with a bone. See the way his ribs poke through his shirt. Hear the growl in his belly. Paint a picture. Don't explain it. I think the kids have a lot of fun. Like my kids really enjoyed this, pretending to be Gary in the lessons. Here's an excerpt from Guts by Gary Paulsen. The Madness of Moose. Just such a great example of Gary's gritty writing. This is if you have, I have reluctant writers and I have proficient kids who love to write, and both love this. Also, I will say that when I was teaching middle school, I was primarily the grade 6 and 7 English teacher. That's what I taught all day long. And I always, no matter, I just took whatever unit I could and I always included Gary Paulsen because he had the broadest range. I don't have a student, I can't remember a student ever being like, I don't like this. They were all like, yeah, I'm down with this. We're going to talk about personal anecdotes because Gary Paulsen bases so much of his writing on his really interesting life. And so when he's talking about the madness of the moose, it's he experienced that. He was charged by a moose. When he did the Iditarod, I'm saying that right, multiple times. He ran dog sleds for that race and also just in life. He just has a very diverse, very interesting life, and so he draws so much on his own personal experiences, and so this is getting your kids to tap into their own personal experiences. Plot diagram, we really want to focus on the elements of plot and how do we build a story, just understanding that structure, right? Wild words throwdown. Write a short story, 3 to 5 pages that centers, I believe that's the end. I'm going to leave that back to the end. Okay, words that punch you in the gut. Choose 3 of the prompts to finish in a descriptive style of Gary Paulsen. So what you'll notice about this resource is that we're not going in and just asking them to just straight up write a story from scratch. We're actually just bringing in almost little micro stories, and so they can write portions of a story and they don't have to write the whole thing. And I think that makes it so much more manageable. It utilizes your time and it allows them to practice a lot of different skills in writing without getting bogged down by the overall aspect of your whole plot setup and everything like that. So, one example is the wind whipped through a canyon, a banshee's wail that tore at your clothes and sent dust devils swirling across the cracked earth. Describe the feeling of the wind on your exposed skin. So then they would continue on with a descriptive paragraph on that. Back to, switch that around. Sorry, these are all out of order because of how I take the pictures. Memory grid. So it gives them 1-word prompts, and that's another part of drawing on that personal anecdote side of things. Here's that tapping into your memories. And so we have wild words, vocabulary sheets in here. And so we're keeping it pretty like manageable and not the constant row to write the definition, write a sentence using it, use it in your own words. There's nothing wrong with those. It's just that you can see them all the time, right? So this one, we talk about the word you like best. Which one's the trickiest to spell? Use one of the words in a sentence. And then we have things like this where we're going to dial in these sentences. So they have to read these sentences and see if it is used correctly, and if not, they correct it, so they get to kind of be the editor. It just gives a different spin on that, right? Echoes and shrapnel sentences. We came up with fun names. We by me, my multiple thoughts in my head. So echoes and shrapnel. You'll notice in Gary Paulsen's writing that he uses a lot of sentence fragments. We call them artful sentence fragments. I'm trying to find an example here. Upon finding raw turtle eggs, this was from Hatchet, he picked up one and tried to break the shell and found it surprisingly tough. Finally, using the hatchet, he sharpened a stick and poked a hole in the egg. He widened the hole with his finger and looked inside. Just an egg. It had a dark yellow yolk and not so much white as he thought there would be. Just an egg. Food. Just an egg he had to eat. Raw. Okay? So that's an example of these shrapnel sentences that we call them. They're little sentence fragments, but he uses them very intentionally to like get to the grit of the situation, to mimic the thought of the character, and things like that. Okay? He also uses like the resays, like those, which is what we call the echoes, like just an egg that he had to eat. He's just like echoing himself there. So then they get practice with echoes and shrapnel sentences. And they just love that. It's just like nice little, like teeny little writing assignments and something you can do within a lesson where you're not having to be bogged down. And then we have the aspect of conflict in a story, and we call that throwing rocks at your characters. So you just get to like have fun and just constantly push hurdles at your character, which kids love doing. They're just like, yeah, can you just like think of like a way to, make an obstacle for your character to have to overcome? They think it's super fun. And my kid and I used to play a game where, when he was super young, where he would draw a stick man doing something, and then I would like thwart it. So like if he was, building a sandcastle and he drew that, then I would draw a wave coming over and crashing it. But then he would draw a surfboard surfing the wave, and you just kind of like have that back and forth. So kind of similar in that you are just throwing these obstacles at your character. So you'll get a story prompt and then they have to throw a rock at that character. So right, we go back to, this is where the plot stuff should have actually come in. And then we have the wild words throwdown at the end, where you're going to write a short story and it brings them through that and talks about tying all of these skills together into a short story that centers around wilderness survival situation, talks about the steps, the tips and things like that. So that is the wild words. And now the Jean Craighead George one is a bit smaller. Price reflects that. This one, Jean Craighead George, is the one who wrote My Side of the Mountain and things like Julie of the Wolves, is it Charlie's Raven, stuff like that. She's very much a naturalist. Beautiful writer. And so this package is primarily on writing nature as a character. Okay, so in this example here, we have writing the desert as a character. We have a bit of her backstory. I wanted kids to be able to really get a sense of who these authors were and where their writing came out of, because I think that's important. Is that, sorry, I'm looking so much this way, I'm getting a crick in my neck. It's important for kids to see themselves as writers, and so it's important for them to see how other writers developed and draw on their own experiences. We're talking about personification as a way to really make nature alive as a character, which is something often used. Screen went dark there. We have, again, that's more personification. We have a similar wild words assignment there. We have a collection of wild words, and kids are going to add their own as well, but it's like goes through weather and animals and smells and sounds, so it's giving them lots of introduction to new words. They're going to create a mood board, nature is a vibe, and they're going to, yeah, like bring all these images together so that they have a mood board to write from when they are writing about nature. Again, it's picking a prompt and then writing a paragraph to create nature as a character. So that's primarily what that one is about. There's definitely more pages there that I didn't have printed out. And then lastly is this book dive on My Side of the Mountain. So obviously that pairs super well with this one. All three of these pair really well together, but obviously Jean wrote this, so it's like a great one to do together. The way I wrote this, I didn't want to have the traditional chapter by chapter, right, you know, like have questions about the chapters. I wanted to just work within the theme of the story and work with the elements of the story and go a little bit deeper. I call it a book dive because generally that's what we called our style of units, was like deep dives. So again, we have more information on Jean here. And we have some just like kind of like fun things. It's just like, let's pack for, you know, Sam in this story intentionally goes to live in the Catskill Mountains. So we have, you know, a cutout with all of these, you know, things that you can put in. And then they're going to talk about the things they would pack and why they would pack them. So it gets them into the mind of the character. We learn about where the Catskill Mountains are, and let's find some information from the map. And then we're also doing our own, like mapping the symbols there. Land history. This one's a fun one, about like Sam wants to go to the Catskill Mountains because that's where his family, his grandfather had a farm, the Wrigley Farm. And so it's kind of looking at what's the land history in your family? Where have your parents lived before? Where have your grandparents lived? And further back, then we're going for foraged writing materials because Sam keeps a journal, but he just has to forage all of his writing materials. So we're getting outside and we're doing that. We're having a tree Airbnb because Sam lives in a hollowed out hemlock tree, which was my dream growing up. And you're making like a listing and reviews for your tree B&B. We have all this aspect of nicknames in this story because Sam meets this person and Sam reminds this guy of Thoreau, and so that's what he calls him. He calls him Bando. He calls the raccoon Jesse James. And so we're like, where are all these nicknames coming from? Because they all have significance, but they're obviously, this book was written so long ago that a lot of the kids probably don't know who Henry David Thoreau was, or don't know who Jesse James was. So then we're going to learn about those people. So yeah, see, it's just fun stuff. Collage assignment. We're drawing frightful, clay pots, whittling, fashioning a fishing hook. So as you can see, it's very hands-on. It's not just questions and answers at all. So yeah, I just wanted to share about these because, like I said, I was looking at them and I'm like, dang, I don't really feel like I've talked about them very much. And they're like some of my favorite authors still, even as an adult, and some of my favorite products. So if you would like to check them out, they are in the shop and I will provide all the links.